Hello, and welcome to The Pool is Abstract, where we're currently rewatching and dissecting the revived series of Doctor Who, episode by episode. My name is Connor, and with me is the ever-looming...
Looming?
Yeah.
Just Charlotte. I'm not looming.
What
looming?
A great intro. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know where that sentence was going when I started.
Thank you. Yes, one thing you need to know about me, I'm looming.
Ever-looming.
Ever-looming.
She's always there, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, today we are talking about another episode of Doctor Who. So what did we watch last, Joe? We watched Series 1, Episode 6. Mm-hmm. It's called Dalek.
Yeah.
What was the monster of the week?
I don't know. I can't remember. Was it something like a garlic?
Oh no, not the garlic. So Dalek aired on April 30th, 2005. I think this episode is like kind of notable. Well, for multiple reasons. One, like the biggest one, is obviously it was the return of the Daleks. First time you see it in like the revived series, but obviously Daleks are probably the most famous thing in Doctor Who.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Daleks or TARDIS, one of the two.
I'd probably say TARDIS then Daleks.
Yeah. But obviously that's like the iconic thing you think of when you think of the show. So this was their grand return to the revived series. I think also this story was written by Robert Shearman, who wrote, I think it was an audio drama for Big Finish in the 90s, I believe. It was called Jubilee, and Dalek is pretty much an adaptation of that. I don't know, I haven't listened to Jubilee, so I don't actually know how faithful of an adaptation it is, because I know, like, you know, the Human Nature story, that was based off a book as well, but to my knowledge that's a fairly faithful adaptation, where Jubilee to Dalek I think is a bit more like themes and ideas are translated, but the actual story is different.
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to it because I'm kind of curious. But Robert Shearman essentially wrote this audio drama and then adapted it into this episode, so that's kind of cool. The other thing, I guess, is that this is not our introduction, but our first proper look into the Time War. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's been mentioned in episodes before this, but
Yeah.
don't really know much about it.
Yeah, I mean, in The End of the World, we find out there was a war. We find out the Doctor is the last of his kind. Then in The Unquiet Dead, we get a bit of a glimpse into, obviously, the Gelth say that they're victims of the Time War, and the Doctor kind of feels a guilt about that. But this is the episode where we essentially get a bit more meat on the scenario, and we find out more details. Yeah, do you have any preamble before we jump in?
Nope.
So direct, so to the point.
No amble.
No, no preamble, just amble.
Just amble. I'm ready for the amble.
I'm ready for the central amble. Let's go. So the episode opens with the TARDIS landing in what appears to be a museum. It's following a distress signal and appears in a kind of like underground bunker. I believe the Doctor says it's 2012 in Utah. They have a look around and they quickly realise that they're in a museum that's essentially full of like alien artifacts. Some of the things that the Doctor points out, there's the mileometer from the Roswell crash. That's fun. Rose notices a stuffed Slitheen arm, which I kind of feel like was just them reusing a prop they had handy from the episode prior.
Yeah. I would love to know where they got that arm from.
Well, that's the thing. It would have been...
Was it from London?
Yeah,
After
from the missile, yeah.
Yeah, there was just an arm someone auctioned off.
Well, that's the thing. If you imagine, like, I don't know, say this episode was like a 12th Doctor episode. So you had Peter Capaldi in the museum, and then you saw the Slitheen arm. You think, oh, wow, what a cool reference, what a throwback. But the fact that this is literally the episode after the Slitheen episode does feel a bit like, oh, that's okay. That's
I guess it's
convenient.
got to have something for Rose to recognise, I guess.
Yeah.
Because so far she hasn't had anything. Like the
Yeah, I guess
don't
the
have
Slitheen,
anything.
not the Slitheen, Cassandra's dead, and the Gelth are kind of non-corporeal, so I guess the Slitheen's the only thing.
Cassandra wouldn't have been around at this time either, unless she fell through
That's
the
true.
time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. the Doctor is more preoccupied with the helmet of a Cyberman. It's obviously a classic Who Cyberman. I'm not nerdy enough to tell you which story it's from.
Yet.
Rob could tell us.
Rob. Oh, don't out Rob.
You know he knows.
Yeah, he do it.
Just for context, our friend Rob is probably the one person I know who knows more than me about this show.
We're hoping to get him on soon.
Yeah, we might feature Rob in an episode. I've got loads of ideas for like games and stuff we can do, but I don't know how fun you'll find them because I feel like because you're not as in the show as we are, say, I don't know if you'll either find it too difficult or if I don't know how to say this without sounding pandering, but if I try to like make it easier, then it would just kind of be a bit dull.
Too easy.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. But yes.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so the Doctor's, he's noticed this Cyberman head. He says it's an old friend, well, enemy. There's this really cool shot as well I like where the camera's kind of like behind the glass and you can see the reflection of the head, and when the Doctor kind of steps into frame, his like face like lines up with the helmet, which I think is kind of cool. But then the Doctor kind of like touches the glass and he sets off an alarm, and then a bunch of soldiers basically pop up. What does Rose say? Rose says something like, "Oh, if this is a museum that's like collecting aliens, that makes you Exhibit A."
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder, like, why would you say that?
I know. I know. My note for this scene is that obviously they're at gunpoint, and the Doctor's grinning again.
He always is, isn't
Literally, I don't know how many episodes so far, or how many scenes so far like we've done that the Doctor is at gunpoint and is grinning.
he? That's like his thing.
It
He loves it.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's a kink.
Oh no. Don't do that. No, I just think he likes being noticed.
Yeah, he's just all
He's
about
like,
the attention.
"Yeah,
Yeah. Yay, me.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the cold open. This is when we get our titles. One thing I do want to mention, I kind of like glossed over it, but when he's looking at the Cyberman helmet, there's a line I love where he's, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but he says something like, "The stuff of nightmares reduced to an exhibit," something like that, and then the camera like cuts back to him, and he just says, "I'm getting old."
Yeah.
I love that.
That is a good line.
I think there's something about that because again, you think like the Doctor here compared to the Doctor now with Shooty, the Doctor's pretty young. Do you know what I mean? Like by Shooty's era, the Doctor's like 2,000 years old.
Yeah.
So when Christopher Eccleston is like a sprightly 900,
Sprightly.
but yeah, when he says that, you know, the stuff of nightmares reduced to an exhibit. I'm getting old, and I don't know. He looks kind of haunted.
Well, you're on about getting old. Rose says 2012, that makes me 26.
Yeah, she says, "God, that's so close."
Yeah.
Because this would have been 2005.
And that is so far away now.
Yeah, well,
And that makes me feel old.
You think about it, was it 7 years after? It was set 7 years after broadcast, where now it's technically set 12, going on 13 years in the past.
If my math is correct, that means that right now in the real world, Rose would be going 38, going on 39.
God.
Oh God.
That makes me feel so old.
Yeah.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Life. Yay.
Oh, I don't want that. So yeah, at this point we have our opening titles. I'm just going to say it every episode. Best titles. Best theme tune, best titles. I love it. The nostalgia gets me every time. I'm going to say it every episode. If you're getting sick of hearing about it, I don't care.
Again, this isn't a visual podcast, but just know my eyes are rolling.
Oh, you know I'm right.
All right.
Once we cut back into the episode, we cut to a helicopter flying above, and the pilot says, "Bad Wolf 1 descending."
Ooh.
He said the thing. Go on, Charles, do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme.
Ooh.
She is doing it. You
Yeah.
can't see it, but she is doing it. Whoop, 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 whoop. This is when we're introduced to Henry Van Staten. He's a bit of a douche, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, he's clearly meant to be like a parody of rich billionaire types. We had another one later in like series 11. You had the guy whose name I can't remember, but who's clearly meant to be like Trump. You know, that guy from Iraqis in the UK. Henry Van Staten is clearly more meant to be like a Bill Gates type person, less political, but more like...
It feels more like an Elon Musk now.
Yeah. The thing is, Elon Musk kind of involves himself in politics now.
Yeah, and like...
I was saying that Henry Van Staten isn't he? 'Cause
he literally involves himself in politics and collects expensive, weird things.
Fair enough.
Elon Musk. And owns the internet.
But you can tell that he was based on Bill Gates because his name in the original script, in like the first draft, believe it or not, was Will Fences.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, that's so... I'm both so glad and so disappointed that they didn't stick with that name.
Come on, Robert Sherman, you should have had the balls to call him Will Fences.
That is terrible, but I love it.
Yeah, so Henry Van Staten is walking down a corridor with his lackeys and his yes men behind him. He's kind of given them... he's telling them his political stuff. He says, like, the president's down, however many points he wants him replaced. He clearly just fires employees whenever he likes. He makes kind of a crap joke, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because they say, like, they're intruders on whatever level. And he says, we don't know how they got in. He goes, intruder window. That was funny. And he has to tell his people when to laugh. Yeah. So he's not a very nice man. And this is when he meets Rose and the doctor. The doctor and Rose are escorted into like his office. Something I immediately noticed. He sat at his desk.
Terrible painting.
Terrible painting.
Terrible painting.
we both made a note of that.
Yeah, terrible painting.
My note says ugly painting.
Mine says terrible painting. I mean, art is art and it's subjective. But
yeah, he's got like a self-portrait on the wall behind him in... How big is that?
I don't know.
You're an artsy-fartsy type.
Yeah,
How big is that?
Yes, they correlate. Oh God, I don't even know. Like,
it's bigger than like life
A1?
size, isn't it? No, A1's smaller than that. A1's like the posters I used to have in my room. It's bigger than that. It's huge, but he's got this like ugly self-portrait behind him, and it's quite horrifying, I will say. So this is when, I mean, Rose even makes a comment about this. She says like, "Well, you can smell the testosterone in the room" or something. Because Van Staten is essentially trying to show off who he is. He gets Adam to introduce him, doesn't he? So Adam is Van Staten's... what is it?
It's like head of artifacts, really.
Yeah.
Isn't
So Adam goes... He basically uses Van Staten's money, goes into auctions to buy artifacts for Van Staten's collection, essentially. He's his lackey. He's another lackey. He gets Adam to introduce him. He says, Mr. Van Staten owns the internet. It's when Rose says, like, nobody owns the internet. Exactly. Let's keep everyone thinking that way, right? You're shaking your head.
It's. I know it wasn't written by Russell, but it's such a Russell era.
You think?
Russell era. Russellism. Like that kind of, I don't know, tongue-in-cheek kind of, I don't know how you would word it.
He wears his political leanings on his sleeve, doesn't he, old Russell?
Yeah, I think a lot of the writers kind of did then.
I know, because like Moffat does a lot, but I feel like Moffat leans less into actual like politicians and more into just left versus right. Do you know what I mean? Like Moffat's era is very like inclusive, very what the right people would call woke. Do you know what I mean?
Or he's very like Moffat. You'll find writing more like speeches about war or hunger or whatever. I think Chibnall goes back to. Well, I don't know. Chibnall does a lot of speeches on things. Do you mean you have like climate change and use of plastics and?
Wait till that episode.
But yeah. So
Van Staten has an artifact that he shows off. He doesn't really know what it is. He just seems like a lump of metal. and the doctor essentially shows him that it's actually a musical instrument.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to really delicately glide your fingers over the metal, and it kind of makes this like high-pitched hum. So he shows him how to do it. Van Statten then does it, and the doctor says like, "Oh, like very good. You're quite the expert." And then Van Statten just like throws it over his shoulders, if like bored now, and just
I literally said, throws instrument, and then poor Adam's face of just being like, oh. It's like, no. You don't even want to know how much he probably spent on that thing. And he's like, oh.
I think he's just bored now, and just throws it. And even the look on the doctor's just like, what the
Don't throw an instrument.
Yeah. So Van Statten says that he has one living specimen, something he calls the Metaltron, and he asks the doctor if he'd like to see it. It's located in the cage down below. So this one we find out essentially the living subject, the Metaltron. Van Statten's like whole goal is to try and get it to talk. So they're currently torturing it by using what looks, I'm assuming, is a drill.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
And it's not talking, it's screaming.
Yeah, which is so sad.
It's funny because we get this POV shot right here, don't we, of from the perspective of the Metaltron. And it's like that blue kind of POV shot, like from the eye stalk. And it's funny because that's something that's like, it's so like, well, yeah, you know what it is, but it's so weird to think at this point how many people would have watched this and not knowing what it was.
Well, that's what I was wondering when we were watching the episode. Like, obviously, I haven't seen any of Old Who, and whether that was a thing. Like, you would have seen it from their perspective, from the eye
From
stalk.
where I am at the moment, which I started from the beginning, and I'm currently in the early John Pertwee era, I don't recall there being any POV shots from the Dalek's perspective. That's not to say there isn't one later on.
Is there like a blue, like the eye stalk resonates like a blue light?
No, in classic Who, because in New Who you can clearly see there's like a blue LED in there, and it's kind of like, even in this episode you see it's kind of like a camera lens, isn't it? Because you know when it zooms in and it looks like an iris, how it gets bigger and smaller.
Yeah.
Where in classic Who it's clear, it's very clearly just like a white dot, where someone's just painted a dot on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Henry Van Statten's trying to get it to talk. They're torturing it. The doctor essentially goes into the room. Henry says, like, don't let him out until we get a result.
One question I do have, they were saying that I think the guy tells the doctor not to touch
yeah, he does.
the creature.
He says the last person to touch it, like, burst into flames.
flames.
Yeah, the doctor says, I won't touch it then.
Well, I wasn't thinking that. What does he mean by burst into flames? Is that a thing?
What do you mean?
Is it? Are they on about, like... Well, they couldn't exterminate. It wasn't an extermination.
I personally, I always interpreted that as either that was just the effects of it falling through time, through the time war, because Diana says that it crash landed and it was like in a smouldering like meteorite almost for like 3 days before anyone could get near it. So either is an effect of that, or maybe during the time war Daleks just developed other things. So maybe inside the shield, if someone touches it, maybe it's kind of incendiary. I don't really know.
Either that, or he's just like, don't touch it.
Or he's just messing with the doctor.
Yeah, he's just like, don't touch it.
Yeah,
just to make sure.
Yeah, last guy. Yeah, because he tries to give him. He doesn't tell him not to touch it, does he? He goes to give him the gloves.
Yeah.
He goes to give him a pair of gloves, and he says, "What are these for?" And he says, "The last guy who touched it burst into flames." He says, "I won't touch it then." Yeah.
Oh, before this, because obviously the doctor goes down on his own. When we're up in the room, Van Statten tells Adam to take care of Rose.
He
and
does, yeah.
Go canoodle or spoon or whatever you Brits do.
Lovely bit of dialogue.
Lovely bit of dialogue. I also like the little part where he says, I see you're a collector of your own. She's quite like a beauty or something. And she's like, if you keep referring to her as a she's going to smack you. I was like, huh.
That's so you. That's so something you would say. That's something my mum would say as well.
I like it.
Yeah.
Go on, Rose, you tell him.
Yeah, so the doctor, I say he goes into the room with the Metaltron. It's a very dark room. He's apologising. He says something like, I know Mr. Van Statten thinks he's clever, but don't worry, I'm here to help type of thing. And you can just see this dark room, and you can just see a blue kind of dot in the background. He introduces himself. He says, I'm here to help. My name's the Doctor. And then this is when... yeah, we essentially get the reveal of Doctor, and you see like the two lights on either side flashing. The Doctor's face is kind of like in disbelief, and then the lights come on, and we get our reveal. It's a Dalek.
And then the Doctor freaks out
With their lovely new bronze design. I know you haven't watched any of Classic Who, but like, to be fair, the Dalek designs stayed mostly the same over the years. Like the Cybermen have had really like drastic redesigns, where the Dalek design has kind of been the same, slight variations here and there, but the main kind of silhouette of a Dalek has been the same forever. Do you know what I mean? But there are differences with this. So the revival introduced what people call the Bronze Dalek, or what I think of as the Time War Daleks. So I justify this change in my head as this is like the casing that the Daleks created for the Time War. So instead of having like round bulbs on either side of the head, they now have these big like heavy duty lamps. They look much more like rustic and kind of like battle worn. It's a great look.
It is a cool look.
To the degree that they've tried several times over the years to like redesign the Daleks, and no one likes it, and they just keep reverting back to the Bronze Dalek because it's kind of the perfect look.
I agree.
Yeah, but once the Doctor realizes it's a Dalek, he the Dalek says something like the Doctor is an enemy, and then tries to exterminate him. The Doctor's like rushing towards the door. He's like, let me out, and he turns around and he realizes the Dalek's gun is just kind of like twitching, but nothing's happening.
my favorite thing is the way, which I think could be a perfect meme template of, it's not working.
Yeah, he kind of like it's
he's
kind
just
of
so joyous and mocking him.
It's such
He's
a
like,
weird
"Not
like kind
working,
of
is it?"
It's a weird emotion to kind of try to summarize, because it's like he clearly sees the funny side in it, because he's like, you're a Dalek, you're bred to kill, you can't do it, what's the point of you?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it is also that clear, like, you know when you have like a near miss and then you kind of laugh out of like nervousness, kind of like
And also,
it's kind of like a mix of the two.
He does such a great, well, in this episode he does a great job, but well, even in the series, but do you mean, I think especially like the way he shows so many emotions in these scenes, and like you said, you could tell the hatred for this thing, and obviously we don't know why yet.
Yeah.
But he hates it, and he's just mocking it. And then he calls it a space dustbin.
It's just the great space dustbin. Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's harsh. Why do you hate it so much?
Yeah. So the Dalek essentially wants orders. And this is when the Doctor kind of starts to simultaneously gloat, and just he's got this venom in him, do you know what I mean? Where he says, well, you're not going to get any, your race is dead.
It's so venomous.
Yeah.
Like, it's so bitter and harsh.
He says,
and
your
cold.
race is dead. The Dalek says, like, you lie. He says, I watched it happen. I made it happen. 10 million ships on fire. The entire Dalek race wiped out in a second. The Dalek asks what happened to the Time Lords, and this is when the Doctor kind of goes from this simultaneous venom and gloating nature to one of like self-reflection, where he kind of turns away from the Dalek and you can just see him. It's almost as if he's been forced to think about something that he's been trying so hard not to think about for a long time. And he just says, they're dead too. And the Dalek says, I'm the last of my kind, you're the last of yours. We are the same. He doesn't like that.
No. Well, instantly he goes to say, like, no, we're not.
He turns around and he goes, we're not the same.
And then he goes, maybe we are. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, he stops. He goes, wait a minute. You got a point. Maybe we are. And he says, I know what you deserve. Exterminate. And he kind of pulls the lever nearby and starts electrocuting the Dalek.
Which is like, it's such... God, it's
So
such a brilliant way to show hatred. Like, you'd never see the Doctor do it, like, let alone anything to hurt anyone. Do you mean?
Even the villains.
Even the villains, let alone torture.
Yeah,
Like, he
because
tries to
that's the thing.
save bad people, but this is like he's going out of his way to torture this thing, and
Yeah.
it's already broken and damaged and alone in the world.
I think
or the
that this is a
universe.
great time capsule of where we are in the Doctor's life, because the Doctor never would have done this, even to the Daleks in Classic Who. He just
No.
wouldn't have, because that's not who the Doctor was. But even the current Doctor now wouldn't have done this.
No.
I feel like even David's Doctor
Yeah,
wouldn't have done this.
And even Eccleston's Doctor, towards the end, wouldn't
Yeah.
have done it.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think by the time like the finale comes around, I think you're right. Do you know what I mean? So even though like David he still has that sort of disdain and that hatred for the Daleks. I can't imagine him pulling the lever to torture one.
No.
So this is such a good like accurate time capsule of where we are in the Doctor's life right now, where this is still so raw for him.
Do you think it's like, again, pulling at things, but interesting to think about? Do you think it's a mixture of him thinking, you know, I did all of that and one still survived, like this, and this could mean more have survived? That kind of thing.
I don't even think it's necessarily more could have survived. It's the thing of the fact that one survived made it worthless.
Yeah.
It made it pointless. Because you know that not only is there like the background thing of like one Dalek could theoretically restart the Empire, if you like, but also one Dalek, even on its own, could destroy the Earth.
Yeah.
And that's something that I will say this episode does really well. Is that
more so than any other episode with Daleks.
absolutely, yeah, you can the destructive power of a single lone Dalek is like really palpable, which I feel like this episode makes later Dalek episodes in Russell's era better by comparison. And what I mean by that is, say when the Daleks come back in Army of Ghost Doomsday, they don't actually do a lot. They don't actually kill a lot of people. But because you know the destructive power of one Dalek, once you see 4 of them together, you immediately think, oh god, this is like a big threat. And then I think the issue it gets, the more they appear, even towards the end of Russell's era, towards like Journey's End, and then going into Moffat's era with like Victory of the Daleks and Asylum of the Daleks and that stuff, is that they kind of become a bit of a joke. Do you know what I mean? We use them a lot more for comic relief, and when you see like the 12th Doctor come up against a Dalek in the pilot, do you even remember that there's a Dalek in the pilot? Do you know what I mean? Because I forget that sometimes. I forget there's a Dalek in that episode. Where it's kind of crazy. They kind of just become this thing where this episode really cements how destructive one of these things can be.
Yeah.
And it makes it so just the very thought of seeing more than one is kind of like, oh, we are so dead.
Well, that's one thing that I know. Obviously, they had to do it for like contractual like obligations. One thing I hate about Doctor Who is that I hate that they had to bring them back. I hate that the more they brought them back, and obviously there's only. Do you mean once you have one, there's only like duplicating them to go from there. Like only trying to make them look bigger and more, you know, I don't know what the word is, but, you know, trying to make them feel like you're more threatening.
Well, I think that's the trap we fall into, isn't it? That every time they appear now, there has to be a gimmick. Because we can't. So this episode is the lone Dalek, and then next time they show up, there's multiple Daleks. There's like an army of them, and there's an Emperor. And it's like, well, where do we go from there? How do we make it scarier than the Emperor? Or we have to say there's these 4 really special Daleks that survived the Time War. And then the next time they come out, how do we make it scarier than that? Oh, well, they start like crossbreeding and they have slaves and they're going to try and make like a human Dalek hybrid. Where do we go from there? Oh, well, we have to bring back Davros. And then it's like, it's as if they're constantly trying to up the game every time they appear. And it gets to the point where you're like, the stakes have gotten so high, they don't feel palpable anymore. When you see this story where it's one Dalek in a museum with like 200 people, that's something you can imagine, where once you get like 1 million Dalek fleet trying to destroy every atom in the universe, that's not a tangible thing anymore.
But even then, it's like, it doesn't feel that's scary. Because this one Dalek, again, we'll talk about it more in the episode, but this one Dalek can do so much.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes it so effective. But anyway,
yeah. So the Doctor starts electrocuting the Dalek, and this is when Van Staten sends his guy in. I can't remember his name. I was hoping that was going to come to me, but it didn't. He sends his crony in to basically pull the Doctor out, and he starts talking to him, and he says, "My name is Henry Van Staten. Now recognize me." And the Dalek just goes mute again. Simmons, that's his name. I know I can't make it talk again, Simmons.
I like the fact that Van Staten's like, we now know its name, Dalek.
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 Yeah, he goes, "Make it talk again, Simmons." And then Simmons kind of has this really like sinister looking green. He's like, "Oh yeah, I love torturing this thing."
So weird.
Yeah. So upstairs, like this is we get a bit weird. Diana Goddard is essentially explaining how the Dalek got there.
Yeah.
She says it crash landed 50 years ago. It passed through several auctions until Henry bought it. The Doctor says it must have fell through time somehow. Henry basically makes a point of saying that this isn't the only alien on Earth now, because obviously he overheard the conversation between the Doctor and the Dalek, and he knows that the Doctor is a Time Lord. Doesn't necessarily know what that means, but he knows the Doctor isn't human. So this is when we cut to the Doctor being chained up, scanned, looks painful.
I want to know what they're doing.
Well, they're scanning him, but it's not like an X-ray thing, because X-rays don't hurt like that, and they don't look like that. Again, I'm going to assume it's something that was developed from alien tech that was found. But we see a shirtless Eccleston, which is
so weird.
Yeah, I don't know why.
So weird.
I think, I don't know how true this is, so I might be just talking rubbish, but I swear that around this time, Christopher Eccleston had he had issues with like body dysmorphia, like anorexia and things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe like bulimia, I'm not too sure. But I swear he had like an eating disorder of some sort. So I think his weight was like something that played upon his mind. But it is really weird because like later Doctors, we kind of get used to seeing them. Like we see David,
it's just so strange.
We see David naked, not fully naked, not full frontal, but we see him naked. Matt Smith gets his shirt off like a whole bunch of times.
Yeah. But yeah, it's so strange. I think because like I don't know the fact that he's just hanging there. He's got his arms are chained, and he's still got his trousers on.
Yeah,
and he's just kind of wriggling around. It's just strange. Weren't expecting it, but yeah, it looks. I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, it does look painful. Some sort of body scan.
So they're scanning him because this is when Van Staten notices that he's got two hearts. So it's clearly scanning his like organs or his biology of some sort. He says a cardiovascular system or something. We basically find out that Henry isn't just a collector, but he sells stuff. Broadband was derived from the Roswell crash, from technology found there. He says that in a Russian crater they discovered bacteria which led to the cure for the common cold. Just in case we needed a bit more context as to how much of a ruthless douchebag Henry Van Staten is, he says, "Why would I sell one cure when I can sell 1,000 palliatives?" Yeah. Just not a nice man.
No. And slightly before this scene, we're taken to Rose and Adam.
Yes.
Upstairs.
Adam's like showing her around the base, and they go to his like office.
Yeah, I do like. I do enjoy this scene because Adam's like, "Oh, look, all this stuff, it's all a lie. There's so much more out there." And Rose says, "That's amazing. I'm gobsmacked." And bless him, he's like, "Yeah, it is." You could tell she's just like, "Yeah, okay, mate.
I'm gobsmacked."
I'm gobsmacked.
It's so
no
British.
way.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Fantastic." She's like, "Oh, you're just like the Doctor."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
so
all
he
right.
says like, "So are you two?" She's like, "No, we're not like that." He's like, "Good. Why is that good?" "Just is."
Oh.
All right, guys. I would say get a room, but you have a room.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm in the room with you.
Yeah.
This is when Adam's like trying to show off his tech skills, and he's like, "Hey, I can show you, like, I can hack into like anything." And he hacks into the camera, and Rose sees the technician torturing the Dalek.
Yeah.
So she asks to be taken down.
Mm-hmm.
And she's let into the cage. I don't know why this happens, because like Adam says to the guy, doesn't he? He's like, "It's okay, she's with me. I've got the pass or whatever." I don't know why they would still let, considering she was an intruder like 10 minutes ago. I don't know why they let her in.
What I noticed is Rose not doing what she's told again, and he's like, "Don't get too close." Instantly goes up to it and touches it. It's like,
yeah, he didn't offer Rose the gloves.
no. Well, I don't think he expected her to touch it.
Yeah,
I don't think
well,
anybody.
he expected the doctor to touch it.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
would you not? I mean, you look at the doctor. He looks like an inquisitive man. We'll give him a little poke.
is it the ears?
No, it's just like his little happy little face, just like.
Yeah. So Rose goes into the room and she says, like, "I'm sorry." Essentially, "I'm sorry they've been torturing you. I have a friend who can help. He's called the Doctor." And the Dalek starts being all...
Oh, he's such a manipulative.
Yeah,
little
he's
bitch, isn't he?
very self-pitying, isn't he? He's like, "I am alone."
I mean, you know he's being manipulative, but I'm also like, oh, bless him. I would have touched him.
Yeah.
I would have been like, it's okay.
Yeah, I think this goes to show that you always think of the Daleks as just kind of being like
A gun happy.
an analogy for Nazis, essentially.
I mean,
just
they are.
walking, just moving around, just being like, exterminate, pew 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 pew, kill everybody.
But I think that's why they're even more like them in this instance, because they were so manipulative.
Yeah.
And it's I love that it's because many cases you think, do you mean you think they were in a time war with the Time Lords? How could they possibly have had that war for so long? How could the Time Lords not have beaten them? And you kind of you're shown a little bit more like they're extremely intelligent. They know how to manipulate
in
people.
Classic Who, they are a lot more intelligent.
Yeah.
They are more manipulative, and they they do a lot. Like, I always think, obviously, because I watched New Who first, Victory of the Daleks, Matt Smith's first Dalek story, there's the thing, with the Ironsides,
Yeah.
where they're like, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And they're kind of pretending to be allies. And I remember thinking, "Oh, that's a really cool concept." And then I realised that there's a Patrick Troughton story called The Power of the Daleks, and they basically do the same thing, except it's done better. That essentially humans discover them as an alien species, and they pretend to be like friendly species,
Yeah.
and they try to help them develop technology, essentially, but they make them develop something that isn't what they thought it was. But
Yeah.
Daleks have always had this kind of like manipulative streak. But I think you get so used to in the modern series, they kind of just become these like gun-ho kind of like...
they just exterminate anything
shoot
they
first,
see,
ask questions later.
But that's what I like about this thing. That I mean, I couldn't technically have shot Rose anyway.
Yeah.
But technically, it could have. Well, I don't know. Could it have sucker plunged her? She was close enough.
I assume if it could have, it would have done that to Simmons already.
Maybe.
Unless it was playing the long game.
Maybe. But I just think it's so... For things that technically don't have emotions, I think it's so interesting that they know emotions so well.
No, the Daleks do have emotion.
They just don't... Well, hate.
Yeah. But that's the difference, because again, I know a lot of people make the mistake of assuming Daleks don't have emotions. Cybermen don't have emotions. Daleks just have the negative emotions. So Daleks have hatred, fear, anger.
Do they? I didn't think they had fear.
Well, here's the thing. So they say they don't have fear. In a couple episodes, they say like Daleks do not fear. Yet you can tell there are times where like, the Doctor will say something, or he'll kind of like lean towards them and they back off. Do you know what I mean? They say they don't have fear, but they clearly do.
Well, I guess you could say that, or you could say technically they could. I guess there's a difference between actual fear and then from their point of view, like it's not a good strategy to get disposed of.
I mean, not to get deep, but like, doesn't the root of hating something come from the fear of something different?
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Mm,
Maybe.
yeah. But yeah, the Dalek's essentially kind of manipulating Rose here. It's kind of being a bit self-pitying. It's doing the
Yeah.
little sad puppy voice. It's like, I am alone in the universe.
Yeah.
And I am dying or whatever. Rose feels bad and she kind of like reaches out and kind of like touches the casing. And then it essentially absorbs her DNA. She's not hurt, but you can see like her handprint there. It starts kind of repairing itself. So all the Dalek bumps that were kind of like cracked start to repair itself. The chains holding it in place break. What does it say? It says like genetic extrapolation complete or something like that. The technician comes in. He's like, "Oh, what the hell have you done?" He goes in. He says, "What are you going to do? Sucker me to death?" And then the Dalek just kind of goes...
And the Dalek suckers him to death. Yeah.
Proceeds to sucker him to death. This is... We cut back to the Doctor, who's like all chained up after the alarm's gone off, and he says to Van Staten, "Release me if you want to live." I think what I like about this episode is, I know Robert Shearman, when he was writing it, he essentially asked his, I can't remember if it was his girlfriend, wife, partner, whoever, why, because by this point, so just to go back, in the 60s, when they were first introduced, the Daleks were really scary. That's where like the whole notion of people hiding behind the sofa came from.
Yeah.
By the time you got to like the late 80s, in like Sylvester McCoy's era and the show getting cancelled, they kind of become a joke.
Yeah.
Because people had grown up a bit, and obviously TV and monsters had developed with the show, and they just weren't that scary anymore. So Robert Shearman asked his girlfriend, wife, partner, whoever, why aren't the Daleks scary? What makes them silly, goofy, what however you want to phrase it? And she essentially gave him a list of things, and he made it his mission with this episode to combat each and every one of them.
That's pretty cool.
So the whole thing of they've got a stupid like sucker plunger. Why do they have a toilet plunger on them? He gives it a function, not just because it suckers Simmons to death, but the Dalek will use it in a moment because they lock the Dalek in the cage, and the Dalek essentially puts the plunger over the panel and calculates the
code,
the combination. She says, if they're silly because they're so like bulky, you can just like run around them. So it makes it so Robert Schumann wrote that middle section kind of like pivots like a gun, and can do like 180 spins. She said the Daleks can't go upstairs. The Dalek can now go upstairs. So he kind of made it his mission with this episode to make them scary again by taking all these things that make them silly and the reasons people don't take it seriously, and actually give them a way to combat that.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, it works.
I agree. Like, I can't remember much about this. I'm almost certain I watched this as a kid. But I remember being scared of it. Like, especially, like, the extermination. The effect they use on that. As a kid, scared the living daylights out of me. I was behind the sofa.
It's interesting, because, again, in Classic Who, the extermination effect was... like, the whole screen goes negative.
Yeah.
So obviously in this episode, you kind of see like that X-ray effect, where it's like his body goes negative and you kind of see his skeleton.
Yeah.
Where in Classic Who, obviously it was black and white at the time, but the whole screen basically just flips around, so the whites go black and the blacks go white. So you kind of got the impression of like this big energy blast, but you didn't see the skeleton or anything. So this is an effect that I believe is unique to the revival.
And it's really effective, I think, personally.
Yeah.
So the Dalek escapes from the cage.
Yes, so it goes through a billion combinations. It absorbs electricity to repair itself, and it downloads the internet.
So many questions.
Yeah, go on, hit me.
So, again, I don't know that much about technology in that sense, but I'm pretty sure you can't download the internet from a monitor screen.
I mean, you can't download the internet, period.
Well, no, you can't. But you could.
But-
Well, technically, you probably could.
You can't. You can
You could
download things
download
on
information
from the internet. You
Yeah,
can't
not
download
the whole internet.
I'm going to assume
but-
that's the Doctor dumbing things down for people.
Yeah.
No, you're right, because he just kind of like plunges the monitor, doesn't he?
Yeah,
And
and
downloads the
He
internet.
not just plunges the monitor; he breaks the monitor. He just plunges into the monitor.
Yeah, what you didn't actually see was just inside the plunger, he's got a USB port, and he just plugs that into the back of the computer. He's got a dongle.
Yeah, that's what's behind the monitor is a USB port which he knows, and he plunges into it.
He just connected to it via Bluetooth.
Yeah. I know. I
He
know
airdropped the information.
Oh no. God, you need some girthy bandwidth to airdrop the internet.
He's a Dalek. He's got the bandwidth.
Yeah, but I don't think his bunker does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. It's many things. I mean, I think if they had servers down there, that would have been. I know. It would have been a higher budget and stuff, and it's very picky. But I don't know. Even.
I guess this is relying on being 2005. People don't know much about the internet yet.
Yeah, probably.
Like nowadays, people would just call bullshit on that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like this is like. Do you get me wrong? The internet had been around for a while.
Yeah.
But not like. It's not like now where like everyone has broadband and Wi-Fi in their homes. Do you know what I mean? It was still new enough that most people probably couldn't have called that out unless they were in IT.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it downloads from the internet to try and learn everything about Earth, satellites, military stuff, all that jazz. The commander basically yells orders at the soldiers, telling them to shoot, and the Daleks.
Matrix, is it? Well,
Well, no, it doesn't Matrix.
I wish it did. I wish
that would be amazing.
It just kind of like.
It starts transform. It's like a transformer. It goes, it's like humanoid, just like dodging the bullets.
No, I just like the idea of it like rocking on the back corner and just like dodging.
It does a wheelie. It tilts on its back and just kind of like. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Just,
No, the guards fire at the Dalek, and again in the classic series, there's a lot of people firing at Daleks, and you always just get the impression that the Daleks are bulletproof, like the metal they're made of is bulletproof. But this is when we actually get the reveal of the Dalek is surrounded by some kind of force field that essentially disintegrates the bullets before it can make contact.
again, another thing that's so scary. Do you know what I mean? It's like you couldn't even hit this thing.
Yeah.
It's guns in our world are very scary. Do you know what I mean? And us being soft little squishy people like can easily be damaged by them, but this thing which is already metal and is you're assuming is probably bulletproof has a force field anyway. Really intimidating.
What I like about this sequence as well, just to show how kind of malicious the Dalek is when the Dalek's in the corridors, and you know how you have guards on one end of the corridor that are shooting at it, and then you have guards appear on the back end of the corridor. So the Dalek's in the middle. It's kind of surrounded either side by soldiers who are shooting at it, and it fires its gun, kills one of them, and then it pivots that middle section and then kills one that's behind it, and then it pivots back
one at a time.
But that's the thing. It could, like, if it wanted to be efficient, it could just go bang, 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 turn around, bang, 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 kill them. That's it. But it's going like one behind, one in front, one behind, and it's like it's toying with them.
Yeah.
It's just kind of showing like, look how pointless this is.
Yeah.
Look how hopeless you are. I am going to kill you, and I can take my time doing it, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And this is again something I've noted, which, I mean, scary Dalek, but also scary Van Staten, is the fact that he says, "Stop shooting. I don't want to scratch on this thing."
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, "They're dying," and he says, "They're dispensable."
He says they're dispensable. That thing's unique. Yeah. So he says, I don't want it damaged. I don't want to scratch on its armor or whatever. He says, "Do you hear me?" And then he realizes
They're all dead.
the gunshots have just stopped. Everyone's dead. So the doctor tells Diana to get guns to everyone who can hold one, basically. This is when we cut to Rose, Adam, and a soldier called DiMaggio, who are basically running away, and they climb a flight of stairs. Rose says something like, "Oh, now we're talking." I can't speak today. He says, "This is more like it. Now we're talking. Flight of stairs. It doesn't have legs. It can't go up." So then the Dalek rocks up into the stairwell, and Adam starts to kind of like taunt it. He says like, deadliest killing machine in the universe, defeated by a flight of stairs. Elevate. Just starts
I'm
to,
sorry,
like,
I couldn't. I know this bit is supposed to be scary, and it is, but also very fun.
Well,
like,
yeah, because that's the thing, like,
elevate.
because Adam is so like smug in the way he says it, and then once the Dalek starts to float, and we cut to Adam's face, and you can tell he's just like, he doesn't say anything, but he's got that face of like, shit.
Yeah, they're like, oh well, that puts our plan out the window. Then I guess we'll have to start running.
Yeah. So Rose and Adam essentially run away while DiMaggio holds it back. And she dies.
Yeah.
She gets shot. Van Staten essentially wants to negotiate with it. The doctor says you can't negotiate with it. He says it's basically racial cleansing at its finest.
He asks like what the population of local towns, local cities
he says
are.
what's the nearest city? He says Salt Lake City, population 1 million, all dead. And Van Staten says like, but why would it do that? And the doctor says because it honestly thinks they should die.
Which is like, oh fuck, man.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's not something you don't already know, but again, there's something about that way of phrasing it of like, it's not because it's angry or it's in a mood or it's got anything against humans in particular. It just honestly thinks that they should die. That's an honest belief it has because it's different.
And I think the way, again, the doctor delivers it as well, it's not like, everybody in the local area is going to die and it's all good because of you. It's just, it's so blunt the way he says it.
He doesn't sound concerned,
dead.
does he? He doesn't sound concerned. It's more like he's trying to really hammer home to Henry,
what have you
What's
done?
the nearest city? Salt Lake City, population 1 million, all dead. And he's kind of like typing on the computer at the same time when he's saying this, and he's just like, that Henry Van Satten's not the kind of guy that you can kind of dance around the subject with. You need to be blunt and direct.
Yeah, because if there's a way he could get out of this Dalek being harmed and could
He's a slimy man, isn't he?
Yeah, if there's a way he could keep this thing, no matter if there is a toll.
He's already of the mindset of he's lost 20 men or whatever, but it's worth it because they're disposable. He said as such. Yeah. They're disposable. This thing's unique.
So if you've got to be so direct with him and include himself, like you're gonna die.
Yeah. So this is when we cut to that section where the Dalek goes into the room with the technicians and the scientists and the lawyers who've all been given guns.
I just want to cut
you get that
off.
one smug guard.
Yeah, I want to cut you off just before this. They're all like, aim at the corner where the Dalek's gonna come.
Yeah.
Ready your fire.
Yeah.
And I wrote in my note, obviously Rose and Adam are running from the Dalek at this point, and they run around the corner. I said, imagine if Rose got shot at this point. Like one guard was just too on edge and was like, bang.
Very trigger happy.
Yeah.
See, what I always pull from this one is when the doctor's giving them advice and he says, it's got a force field surrounding it, so your bullets aren't even making contact, but it's not indestructible. Aim for the center eye stalk, the eyepiece. That's the weak spot. You can get through if you have enough suppressive fire. And then you get that one guard who says something like, thank you, Doctor, but I know how to defeat one single tin robot.
And then he dies.
Yeah.
Basically, the whole thing of this episode is don't be a smug bitch.
Pretty
do
much,
what you're told.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone's in this room ready, kind of on edge. Adam and Rose come through, and they run for cover. The Dalek enters, and they all start firing at it. And once again, it just sits there.
This scene is so good.
Yeah.
The fact that the Dalek literally tunes them in so they can watch. And he just takes the bullets and then he just starts elevating.
Yep.
And he's still taking the bullets and then...
He fires at the sprinklers.
And then shoots the floor. It's literally
very
a game.
Calculated, isn't it?
It's a game to him.
It is. It's like when you're playing a shooter, in real life, there's going to be one way to do something that's the most efficient. Do you know what I mean? So if you're a soldier, there's going to be one tactic, one sort of strategy to hold and fire your gun that's going to be the most effective way to take people out. When you're playing a video game, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go for a melee kill here. I don't actually need to do it, but it kind of breaks up the gameplay monotony. I'm just having fun. I'm gonna hold this grenade and then I'm gonna throw this grenade back, and you do all these like fun little things just to break up the monotony and see how creative you can be whilst killing people.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what this Dalek is doing.
Yeah.
It elevates. It shoots the sprinklers to start raining water all over the floor, and then it shoots the floor, the now wet floor, and basically electrocutes everybody.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So it doesn't electrocute everybody, does it? It does the bottom layer of the people who are standing in the water.
Yeah.
And then the people who are on the rails don't get electrocuted, but then he shoots the rails and electrocutes them then. Like he doesn't even kill them all at the same time.
Yeah.
He does it in 2 stages. And again, he's just looking at the Doctor whilst he's doing this, just to toy with him, because he knows how much it'll,
Yeah. I say all this is still on camera, so Diana, Henry, and the Doctor are all just watching this happen. So then the Dalek essentially tries to talk to the Doctor through the camera. It explains how it absorbed Rose's DNA, which was the genetic code of a time traveler, allowed it to extrapolate her biomass and regenerate itself, which is a big technobabble way of saying, I healed myself.
Yeah, I healed myself from the energy that
I assume it's the Artron energy.
She'd gained from travelling with the Doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
When it downloaded the internet, it searched through satellite and radio telescope systems to find any records of other Daleks, and there aren't any anywhere. This is when the Doctor basically says, well, there are no other Daleks. You're not going to get any orders.
No.
So the Dalek says it's going to proceed with its default function, which is to destroy and conquer. The Doctor says, what's the point? You're the only Dalek left. What are you fighting for? And the Dalek says, I must have orders. This is when the Doctor says, okay, you want an order, here's one. Kill yourself.
Again, it's like, you can understand why. Well, we don't even understand to some degree why he's this bitter, but you could understand in the sense of you can see what one Dalek has done in 45 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah.
So it's like you can understand why he's so bitter, but you just don't expect that from the Doctor.
Yeah, because it's so unlike him. It's
For
so
him to
unlike
be like,
the man you
kill
know.
yourself. It's like, wow, that's so just dark.
Yeah. He says, kill yourself. This is when he has this big old rant, and he says, rid the universe of your filth. Why don't you just die?
And then the Dalek says, you would make a good Dalek. And then turns off the camera. If that isn't a mic drop.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because he does that, and then the Doctor's kind of just left there, kind of like shaken.
Yeah.
Eccleston's so good, man.
It's
He's just
such a
standing
good
there, like,
episode.
just like shaken of like. I think he's realised.
What he's become.
Yeah.
But even then, he's realised what he's become. But he doesn't stop yet.
No.
No.
Because he still feels like he's justified in doing everything, because this is when we essentially get the moment where the Doctor is closing the bulkhead doors. So he wants to hold off closing the doors so Adam and Rose can come through, but power's failing, so he's got to do it before the power essentially runs out. And he could have waited longer, but again, I think he knows how much of a risk this Dalek is, so he starts closing the door maybe a little earlier than he should have, just to be on the safe side. And this is when, as the door's closing down, Adam makes it through. He does a little tuck and roll to get underneath.
A little Indiana Jones moment.
Yeah, I swear though, that door is shutting for so long. Because it goes down and then it looks like it's about halfway, and then it cuts to Adam and Rose running, and then it cuts back to the door, and then you see it go back to about halfway. And then it cuts back, and then they're getting closer and closer, and then it cuts back to the door, and it's still about halfway. But yeah, Adam makes it through. Rose doesn't.
This is the whole thing of Doctor being like, did you make it? And then her saying, sorry, I was a bit slow.
Yeah.
And then she said, it wasn't your fault, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. It's like, oh.
Yeah, well, I think this goes to show in and of itself where it's like how different the response is to thinking they're going to die in comparison to the Unquiet Dead. You know, where Rose is kind of in denial about it, and she's like, I can't die here. I was born in the 20th century. I can't die in the 19th. And the doctors are like, oh, what about me? And there's all this stuff. We're here. Rose kind of accepts it already, but her immediate thing isn't to deny it or to blame anybody. It's to reassure the doctor that it wasn't his fault.
Well, obviously this is the second time she's done this now, because she also did it with Aliens of London and World War III.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's fully aware, I think, from that point.
This is a man who carries guilt on his...
Not only this a man that carries guilt, but this is a man that is dangerous, or at least will take you into dangerous situations. And she's probably had that thought, you know, to herself, thinking the likelihood of me dying on one of these trips is very high. Yeah. And maybe she's thought through, again, like you said, she knows him quite well at this point, whether she's thinking, no, he will be guilty, he will be angry, and whether she's just trying to console him a little. I think it's really good.
I think the doctor's like really, he feels more guilty than he would otherwise about this, because he spent the entirety of the last episode with Jackie on his back saying, promise me my daughter will be safe. So yeah, she says, you know, it wasn't your fault. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And then you hear the Dalek say, exterminate. You hear the laser fire, and the doctor just kind of throws his headset off in like a response.
I think the next bit is so interesting.
Yeah.
The doctor's response, it's like he's avoiding responsibility.
Yeah, because he starts blaming Van Statten for all the deaths, including Rose's. Which, like, yes, but at the same time...
You brought her here.
You brought her here. Rose was the one who freed the Dalek. Do you know what I mean? Yes, he is mostly responsible, and he's not made it any easier, and he's caused needless deaths with all the soldiers and everything. But yeah, there's this kind of venting frustration of trying to take it out on somebody.
I think it's really interesting. I think because in like many other versions of the Doctor, I think his automatic thing would be like, again, instant guilt on his behalf.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the time he would sit there and be like, what have I done? What, you know, I couldn't save them. Whereas like this one is instantly, maybe it's because the situation he's in, he's very angry, he's very quick to snap. Adam comes through the door and he shouts at Adam,
you were quick on your feet.
You were quick on your feet, you left her down there. And Adam snaps back, rightfully, well, you are the one who shut the door.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Yeah. But then this is when we get our reveal that the Dalek hasn't actually killed Rose.
No.
So the camera cuts to them in the corridor, and Rose is kind of like, eyes closed, kind of like curled up, kind of hiding her neck as if like expecting the blast.
Yeah.
That obviously doesn't come. So this is when the Dalek essentially explains that when it absorbed Rose's DNA, it's making it hesitant. And he says something like, you gave me life, what else have you given me?
Yeah.
He says it can feel her fear. This is when the Dalek essentially...
He says, I'm contaminated.
Yes. He says he's contaminated, and the Dalek contacts the Doctor by turning the monitor on again, and it basically says, open the door or I'll kill Rose.
Yeah, and he's like, what will you do to save the woman you love?
Yeah.
Which is like, even the Dalek can tell that the Doctor loves Rose.
Yeah. And the Doctor essentially says, I killed her once, I can't do it again. And he opens the door and he lets them through. I love the way Van Statten says, well, you bleeding heart, what are we going to do now?
And he's like, all the weapons are downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the weapons are downstairs. And Adam's like, only the ones that have been catalogued. And then Van Statten's face confuses me, because he's like, what do you mean? But it's like, well, of course they've not all been catalogued. He's sorting through all the junk. Have you not seen his office?
I guess it's implying that Adam intentionally kept some guns aside.
Well, yeah.
Isn't it? But, yeah. So we cut to Adam and the Doctor in Adam's office again. Adam basically says that Van Staten has a habit of mind wiping his employees when he fires them. So he hoarded these guns up in case he needed to fight his way out.
Doctor says, what were you going to do? Throw your A-levels at them?
Yeah.
I also like the fact that the Doctor rummaging through the bin. He's like, broken, hairdryer.
Yeah.
And you just see Adam's face. He's just wincing as the Doctor's just throwing these things, which, a stupid amount of money it probably cost, over his shoulder.
And then he finds this cannon and he goes, perfect. Lock and load. He like reloads it. I love this next bit. So this is when the Dalek and Rose are coming up to their level in the lift, and they're standing side by side, and Rose kind of like looks over at the Dalek, and you can just see its gun like twitching. It's kind of going like, and it can't. It's like it's ADHD or something. Like it can't sit still. And I love that because I'm not sure if that's kind of like
nervousness,
like a nervous twitch that it's developing, like a further sign that it's absorbing some more human DNA, because I can't imagine the Dalek generally being nervous.
No.
I don't know, but I just love that thing of no one says anything, it's not addressed, but just that gun kind of like twitching, going left, right, left, right, left, right. It's, I don't know, there's something really powerful in that, just kind of like non-verbal, completely visual 10 seconds of film. I think that's really cool. The lift doors open. They enter the same room, and the Dalek essentially corners Van Staten in his office. And Van Staten goes on this really pathetic kind of like,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to help you.
I just want to help you. I just wanted to hear you talk. He goes, well, hear me talk now. Exterminate. And then Rose essentially says, no, don't kill him. You didn't kill me. You don't have to kill him.
And she's like, what do you want?
And
he's like, what? He's like, what am I? He's just so confused and pitiful.
Yeah.
It's like how in a short period of time, this thing that's so frightening and so just intimidating can change.
Well, that's the thing. She says, you don't have to kill him. You didn't kill me. You don't have to kill anyone anymore. Because again, that's its like main directive. But the fact that it's the last one now, there's no point. You don't have, anything to kill for anymore. And the Dalek's reaction is essentially, well, then what does that make me? And Rose says, what do you want? And it says, freedom.
Yeah.
So this is when the Dalek and Rose go to level 1, which is like the topmost floor, just below the surface of the Earth, and the Dalek essentially fires its cannon at the ceiling, blows a chunk of rock away, makes a hole in the roof, and you see this kind of like beam of sunlight come down and shine onto the Dalek. Rose says something along the lines of like, I never thought I'd feel the sun again, or
and
something.
He's like, how does that feel?
Yeah, the Dalek says, how does that feel? And it essentially opens its casing to reveal the Dalek inside.
Tiny little goopy boy.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because the Doctor describes it as... Because Van Staten asks earlier, what does it look like inside the casing? And the Doctor says, the stuff of nightmares. And at the same time, yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, really sad and pitiful looking when you see this thing. It's covered in its little goop. You see that one little tentacle kind of like reach up into the sun to try and like feel the warmth. And you do feel bad for it. You do feel really...
so bad for it.
This thing you've just watched kill people mercilessly for the last... half hour, 40 minutes, and now you just sat here thinking like,
I'd hold his little tentacle, hold his little hands.
How has Robert Sherman made me feel sad
so
for this thing that has just mercilessly slaughtered people for the last half hour?
This thing is basically a Nazi.
Yeah, essentially.
It's like, how am I feeling bad for it? It's so pathetic. And I think it's so interesting because before it was trying to make you feel bad for it, but now it's just...
You genuinely feel bad for it.
You genuinely do, because it's so pitiful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think you're not just feeling bad for it because it's the last of its kind. Because if it was genuinely just the last Dalek, you probably wouldn't feel that bad about it. But the fact that it's becoming more and more human and it's starting to spare people, you feel like it has potential to grow and develop and become something better. And I think the fact that it essentially just wants to die now makes that more sad, because you yourself as a viewer feel like you have the potential to become something so much greater.
I also think that Rose plays a big part with this. I think her reaction to the Dalek is what makes us feel so bad for it. I think the fact that obviously she has no history with this thing. She doesn't know about it. She's seen it kill people, but she still feels bad for it. And she's, again, you know, even after everything it did, she says to Adam, like earlier on, you know, I like the way it looks at me is if it knows me. And she pities this thing so much, and she cares for this thing almost.
Well, Rose has mercy, doesn't he? Doesn't she? If you think back to the end of the world, do you remember after the Doctor brings Cassandra back without her moisturizers, and she starts drying up, and Rose says, "Help her," and the Doctor basically refuses, and he says, "No, everything dies, everything has its time," and she kind of just like explodes. But even in that moment, Cassandra, who had done awful things and even kind of had a personal kind of, you know, back and forth kind of slagging match with Rose, essentially. Do you know what I mean? Rose wanted the Doctor to help her.
Well, I feel like, I think this is what's so interesting about this season, is most of the episodes, Rose is literally dragging compassion out of the Doctor.
Yeah.
She's like, help it, do your job. Like,
but
it's pitiful, it's harmed, it's hurt, it's in danger. Do something about it. And the Doctor, majority of the time, is like, no, I don't want to.
Well, this is essentially Rose's function.
Yeah.
As a character for the Doctor's character in the long term, this is essentially her function. I know we've spoken about this, like, obviously, while not recording loads of times, but, you know, this is why Rose is so important to the Doctor. I think a lot of people obviously have nostalgia for Rose as a character because when they watched the series when they were younger, she was the companion. So that's why people now look fondly and they're like, oh, Rose was such a good companion, because they have that nostalgic thing. But the reason Rose holds a significant place in the Doctor's heart, and the reason why she's probably the closest that the Doctor's come to actually romantically being involved with the partner, and I think that's even including characters like River Song later, who, you know, technically is the Doctor's wife, but I feel like he had an actual deeper love for Rose than he did for River Song.
I mean, he knew Rose better than River Song.
Well, the thing is, River Song, he was kind of ended up having to marry her because he was told from a younger age that he would end up doing it, so he kind of had to not create a paradox. Where with Rose, it was just one of those things where she essentially changed him for the better.
And I think it's really interesting. I think it gives, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird link, but it's very Star Wars vibe in the sense of, and I know it's not going to be from a romantic point of view, but from Luke and Darth Vader.
What do you mean?
Well, the sense that Rose is very like Luke. And everybody else
has given up, you think?
Has given up on the Doctor.
Yeah.
Everybody else has said how cruel and, you know, reserved he's become. And she, again, a lot of companions at this point would have gone home. They would have like, I've had enough of you. I mean, even, you look at, what's her name?
I mean, Clara
look at Donna.
would have.
You look at Donna. Even Donna was like, she was screaming at Tennant.
Yeah.
After, you know, the couple of trips that they'd gone on, and he'd, you know, he said he couldn't intervene or he couldn't do anything. Yeah,
with Pompey, obviously in The Runaway Bride, he kills all the Racknell's children. Yeah, I say even Clara, like, when the Doctor puts her in that position and Kill the Moon, and Clara essentially has enough and decides to stop travelling with him. Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of companions would have just drawn the line at this point.
But she doesn't. And I think, you know...
But again, I do wonder how much of that is because Rose is super compassionate and cares about the Doctor, and how much of that is because Rose has such a boring life at home that this is her escape.
Maybe a mixture of both.
But again, that's not to say that Rose is like an awful person, but it's, again, like the other companions had more of a home to go back to, I guess.
But I think it's interesting because also her reaction to the Doctor's very different. So the other companions, they'd instantly shout at him. They dress him down.
Yeah.
Whereas she doesn't. She reasons with him. And again, we get to the point now where the Doctor comes in with a gun and he's like, step out of the way.
Yeah, he shows up with a cannon. He tells Rose to get out of the way.
And she says no.
She says no. She says, it spared me. It's changing. And then she asks the Doctor, what are you turning into?
Well, he says something like, it's a monster or it's dangerous. And she's like, it's not the one holding the gun at me.
Yeah.
And it's like,
ouch.
Again, ouch. It's so powerful. She's, again, without shouting at him, she stayed completely calm again, which is brilliant for a character that is so young to hold her composure and just be like, reflect on who you are.
I think that's the difference, because I think when, like, say, Clara dresses down 12 quite a lot, and, like, say, Donna dresses down 10 quite a lot, but what Rose...
And even Martha dresses down 10 a lot as well.
But what Rose is able to do is, instead of just having a go, having a rant, Rose actually forces the Doctor to self-reflect.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, I don't agree with what you're doing.
She makes him feel guilty.
Yeah, she's saying, actually take a look at what you're doing. This thing is not the one pointing the gun at me.
Yeah.
It's changing.
Yeah.
So are you, but you're changing for the worst.
You're becoming what you're trying to kill, basically.
Yes.
And I think that's the most important thing, because you look at 10, the journey 10 goes on and what he eventually becomes.
Yeah.
And I think again, not necessarily that could be true, but I think if Rose had stayed around a little bit longer, I don't think he would have got to that point.
Well, he did get better, because that's the thing. If you think of the end of Journey's End, with the Meta-Crisis Doctor, and obviously the Doctor takes Rose back to the parallel Earth and leaves the Meta-Crisis Doctor with him. And she says, oh, but it's not you. And he says, that is me. That's me when we met, born in anger and bloodlust and hatred, and you made me better.
Yeah.
So you need to make him better. And I think, and bear in mind, that's comparing Rose and 10 at the beginning of 10's life.
But then, even then, though, part of me thinks that I don't know whether he is better at that point. I think that's just a big-headed thing.
I think he is better. I think 10 is a lot more. I think 10 is a lot more merciful in Series 4 than he is in Series 2. Again, I think of Series 2, like, in his first episode when he kills the Sycorax and he says, no second chances, I'm that kind of a man. And, there's the thing with the Krillitanes in School Reunion where he says to the lead Krillatane, he says, stop now, leave, you get one chance, that's all you get. If I have to stop you, then I will. Where as he gets on, I think he does become more merciful until the end of Series 4, when he essentially loses everything at that point. And obviously when he reaches his downfall, it's kind of in those specials when he's on his own. And that's kind of a common thread in the entirety of Doctor Who, is that the Doctor should not be alone.
No.
He needs someone to ground him and to bring the humanity out of him, I think.
That's probably why he always picks humans.
Yeah.
Because he's just, I don't know, it's, I guess as humans, we don't explore the whole of space. We have a small rock in comparison to everything else, do you know what I mean? And I think often we lose humanity. But when, it'd be even easier for someone like him who has the powers he does to lose it. And I think it's good that you can find a human at some point.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I do think the 10th Doctor is more... he does have a journey from the beginning of, like, Series 2 to the end of, like, Series 4. But, again, where we are now with the 9th Doctor, this is before even that. He's even more raw right now. So that's why when Rose kind of dresses him down here and says, you're not, he's not the one pointing the gun at me, what are you turning into? This is when the Doctor essentially just drops the gun immediately. And he says, I couldn't, I wasn't. And and he says, "Oh, Rose, they're all dead."
Yeah.
And I can't help but wonder, in this moment, I'm wondering, like, is he talking about everybody here in the
Is he talking
bunker,
about all the Daleks?
or is he talking about his people and the dark? Is he referring to the Time War when he says they're all dead, or is he talking about where they are now?
Yeah. I think personally I took it as either he's talking about all the Daleks are all dead or all the Time Lords are all dead.
Yeah.
That's how I think. He's probably talking about the Time Lords because he's trying to justify.
I don't think he is trying to justify at this point. I think because he's dropped the gun by now, I think this is him just kind of, I don't know how to say it, but reaching out for support. Do you know what I mean? He's looking for a bit of empathy, I think.
Yeah.
Because the Dalek realizes that the new DNA is changing it. It's developing new ideas.
And he says you're regenerating into something new, and the Doctor says, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah, the Doctor says, "I'm sorry," because Rose says, like, "Isn't that a good thing?" And the Doctor says, "Not for a Dalek," because he knows. We've already said, you know what I mean, that a Dalek is the ultimate in racial cleansing. It's designed to
be one thing and one thing only.
Be one thing and kill anything that's different. And the fact that this is the last Dalek
and
is now becoming different. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it wouldn't even be that sad if there were other Daleks, because this Dalek would be like, it would be expected to be exterminated. It would expect the other Daleks to kill it to continue the purebred line of Daleks. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that this is the last one, he says, "I am the last Dalek," and the Doctor says, "You're not even that."
Yeah, which I don't know whether is a nice thing or a really horrible thing.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I guess it is a nice thing for the universe, but not for the Dalek.
Yeah, it's like you're not even a Dalek anymore, and it's it
so
just asks Rose or begs Rose
to give it orders
to die. Yeah.
Yeah, to order it to die.
And she's like, "No."
Rose says no. But then this is when the Dalek says, "This isn't life. This is sickness." And Rose essentially goes along with it, and she says, "Go on, then do it."
I'd give him a cuddle before. Give him this
like the casing, or like would you pick the little squid boy up?
Pick up the little goopy squid boy.
Oh no, not the goopy squid boy.
Give him a little pat on his head and be like,
"Oh, pat.
Good boy." Back in the case.
Put him in a little pushchair. Just take him around.
Give him a little dummy.
Yeah.
That would be death. That would be sickness.
Oh, God. Yeah. At this point, Rose essentially runs back towards the Doctor, and the Dalek self-destructs.
Which I think is so cool, watching the little
so it elevates, and then all the little Dalek bumps fly, like they come out of the casing. They're revealed to be like spheres, and they kind of surround it like a ball, create like an energy field, which then essentially just evaporates everything inside. It's a really cool effect.
It is a very cool effect.
The CGI is a bit so-so.
Yeah.
Like even the CGI of the Dalek case opening up, you can tell, like when those forward bits come forward, you can tell it's CGI. But it doesn't suck me out, really. It's just kind of noticeable. But yeah, the final Dalek is dead. This is when we cut back to Diana Goddard. She's telling the guards to essentially wipe Van Statten's mind and leave him on the road somewhere, like he always did for his employees. She does this because he caused the death of 200 people. She's essentially ordered for the entire vault to be filled with cement. They're abandoning it and just moving on. Back in that first room, right at the beginning of the episode, we have Rose and the Doctor obviously heading back towards the TARDIS. They're kind of just reflecting on the events of the episode, I guess. And the Doctor says, "Hey, would you look at that? I guess I win. I win the war."
Which for me is, I don't like that.
I don't mind it because I don't think he's saying it in
like
he's not like in a bragging way. It's more, again, like self-reflective. He says, like, "Look at that, I win." It's more like, it's almost like he feels bad for himself because he knows, like, yes, but at the same time, he has nothing really. Like I know he has Rose, but he has nothing of his people.
Yeah.
Nothing, nothing really to show for it. What was it for?
He is alone in the universe.
Yeah. Rose asks, could any of the Time Lords have survived? If a Dalek survived, maybe they could be there. He says, no, I would know. Adam shows up. he's warning them. He says, Goddard is gonna, fill the base with cement. It's gonna be sealed in. Rose wants Adam to come in the TARDIS. He says, "Go on, Doctor. He was a help." And he says, I don't know. He's a bit pretty.
Didn't notice.
She says, I hadn't noticed.
Yeah.
On your head be it. So Rose and the Doctor enter the TARDIS.
And he's like, I'm being serious. They're going to fill it with cement. Come on.
Yeah, he goes, Doctor, what are you doing inside a box? And he walks inside.
And then we get the
ending
sequence.
Yeah, and that's it. So, episode roundup. What do you think?
I think overall a very good episode.
Yep. Best one so far, 100%.
Best written, but not my favourite so far.
You do like The Unquiet Dead, don't you?
I love The Unquiet Dead.
Compare this to Aliens of London World War 3.
Oh, God, yeah. Mountains better. I think for me, we're very different in the sense of I can say, like, an episode was brilliant and written well, but if I don't get the vibe off of it, it doesn't sit as high up. Whereas I think you're less about the vibe. We spoke about this the other day. You were saying the difference between your 9s and 10s. Well, like,
yeah. So if I'm gonna rate an episode, I kind of have a very like objective system that I use, right? Which like a 5 out of 10 is average. So I know a lot of people kind of default to like a 7 out of 10 being average. No, 7 out of 10 is a good score. So for me, it's like a 5 is like average, 6 is good, 7 is really good, 8 is like fantastic, 9 is like one of my favorites, and then 10 is like perfect, right? And I kind of have this like system that I use. But there are some episodes like this, I would consider this a 9 out of 10 episode. If you ask me what's wrong with it, I couldn't tell you anything. I can't think of anything that's wrong with it. The difference for me between a 9 and a 10 is vibe. So I can't really tell you what vibe I'm looking for, what I like. I just know a 10 when I see it.
And I think we're similar in that sense, except my vibe starts at a lower number.
Yeah.
I think my vibe starts at a 7. So I think this episode was very good. I would probably say it's a 7 or an 8. Probably a 7. I think that's where I'd sit comfortably with it. I really like it. I think it does a brilliant job with the Daleks. I think it does the best job with the Daleks in the revival.
I think you're right.
I think it's actually very much a shame.
I think this is the best Dalek story.
Yeah, I think it's a shame what happens afterwards. I think it's very good what it does with the Doctor and how it shows us a different side of him, because we've seen him kind of like this a bit cold, shut off version of him, but we haven't seen him this bitter and like vicious.
Yes.
We also see more of Rose's empathetic side. And even when, the other times you can kind of, I think you could reason a bit more with her sympathising with things. Do you know what I mean? Like, even though Cassandra was terrible, she's not a Dalek. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can kind of, sympathise with how she feels about things.
I guess normally, like, with Cassandra, that's like, you see her as empathetic, but she's empathetic because she's a person. Yeah. Where this is where you realise she's empathetic because she's a truly empathetic person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's really good. I think Van Statten's a cool idea. I don't particularly love him as... I know he's not the villain of the story, but he's kind of like the side
I
villain.
quite like him. I think in terms of creating a kind of a cartoonish caricature of real life types of people, I think he's one of the better.
And I think that's probably why I don't like him so much. I think that word caricature is the perfect word. I hate that. I hate caricatures.
In through the window.
That's the
See, I think the guy I was talking about earlier in the Arachnids in the UK, the like knockoff Trump guy, I think he is worse in terms of, I mean, he is definitely a worse character, but I think he is worse in terms of feeling less like a character and more like just a parody of Donald Trump. It seems like Chris Chibnall clearly had some views on Donald Trump and just tried to write a straw man kind of cartoon of him. And
like I said, I
Van Statten, he is a bit overly selfish and I don't know, self-centered. He's a bit too egotistical maybe to be realistic. But at the same time, I believe him as a character way more than I do that other guy.
I mean, I can't
His
remember.
name I can't even remember.
I can't remember that. I think I've only seen that episode once, but I think things that I would change about this episode to improve, because I guess I've kind of done that in the past, so I'll do it again. So I would change Van Statten. I would give him a different vibe. I think, I don't know.
Would you make his name Will Fences?
Yes. I think for me, how I again said in Alien of London, I think this will probably run through majority of this series. It's too tongue-in-cheek for me. It's too...
You think this episode's too tongue-in-cheek?
A lot of it, yeah. I don't know, maybe I should just be watching Torchwood instead. Like again, I don't usually want that. I want my episodes to be one way or another. I want them to be lighthearted and whimsical, or I want them to be serious and scary. I don't want it in between. I don't want to jump between the vibes, because I struggle to stay immersed. You know, I'm struggling to be like, I'm fearful of the Dalek, and then they're like, look at Van Statten doing something silly, isn't he a silly man? And then it's like, jump back to the scary Dalek, and I'm like, I don't know where I am. So that's what I would change mainly. And I'd like a little bit more time with the Dalek and Rose. And that's it.
On their own? On
their own. Towards the end, I'd like it to be a little bit longer. Maybe a little more of a conversation between them.
What would you have put that maybe in the lift when they're coming up?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe
in are you thinking after that?
Maybe in the lift, or maybe as, he goes into the level 1 where he shoots the ceiling.
Yeah.
Maybe before the Doctor comes in, giving it a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just to have a few more, I think a few more words between them would be interesting. Maybe it would be cool to have a bit more exposition. I'm not sure whether Rose knows yet that the Doctor knows of the Daleks. Does she know at this point? I don't think she does she? So I think, it would be interesting if the Dalek asked...
Sure, I've never actually thought of that, but I think you might be right. Because her time with the Dalek and the Doctor's time with the Dalek is so separate.
Yeah, so...
They don't actually get in the same room together, do they,
no.
until...
Till that point?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So what I think would be interesting there would be again, because the Dalek's becoming more human, would be to ask her why she travels with the Doctor. I think that would be interesting, because he's kind of, it's somebody he hates so much.
Yeah.
From his point of view, maybe if he was asking her, why do you go off with him? Why,
That's
and how does it make you feel? Something like that, I think, would be quite interesting. Just a little bit extra between them. And that's how I would.
Yeah, because if she said, for the sense of wonder, exploration, that's something that would... those are concepts that would be so alien to a Dalek.
But then he may be more likely to know how that feels.
Yeah.
I think,
that's interesting, because I think having that there, maybe the Dalek, without ever having actually experienced it, could understand it.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of get that further down the line, don't we? In Capaldi's era in Into the Dalek.
Well, Rusty.
Yeah, we kind of get that a little bit when he sees the stars and he knows how it feels.
Yeah.
We get that there, but I think it'd be cool to have that there and have, if Rose asks why, maybe maybe him explain, I've always feared the Dalek and never understood those.
I think it's
Something
not
like
a
that.
fault of this episode, but I think something that irks me later as we go on is there's a handful of episodes where the concept of a good Dalek is brought up, and the Doctor says there's no such thing as a good Dalek. It doesn't happen. And I'm like, Doctor, come on! You've seen this happen so many times. Like it happened in Dalek.
Well,
It happened in. Well, maybe this isn't a good Dalek, but
I am going to give you a little piece of information that may change your opinion on this.
yeah.
Doctor said that he's no longer a Dalek.
Yeah, okay, fine.
So maybe if it's good,
even
it's
if-
no longer a Dalek.
Even if you're going to be that...
God, his face. It's like, damn, she makes a good point.
Yeah, because I was going to... Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say, you could also argue with Dalek Sec in Daleks in Manhattan, but again, you could say, not a Dalek.
Not a Dalek.
Mm,
You could argue Rusty wasn't really a Dalek. You could say the whole thing of Daleks.
yeah, if there is a good Dalek, then it's no longer a Dalek.
It's no longer a Dalek.
Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
good point. Fair enough.
Hey.
But
yeah, so overall, you're giving it a 9 out of 10.
it's pretty great.
It's pretty
It's
great.
a pretty great episode. Again, can't think of anything wrong with it. The only reason it's not a 10 is it just doesn't have the vibe for me. It doesn't have bad vibes. It's just, I know a 10 when I see it.
Do you think my little changes might have boosted you to a 10?
Who's to say?
Who's to say?
Who's to say? Do you know why this episode is notable to me, though?
Why?
This is the only one-part Dalek story in the first RTD era.
Is it?
Every other Dalek story is a two-parter. That's interesting.
Is it? Oh, yeah. Well, there is. I was thinking, is it like after RTD? But yeah, of course it is, because it's Victory of the Daleks.
Yeah.
It's a one-parter.
I know when Robert Shearman was writing this story, he had to write a second script because Russell and co weren't actually 100% sure they could get the rights to the Daleks, because the BBC don't own the rights to the Daleks. It's owned by the Terry Nation estate. So Robert Shearman had to write a second script in case they couldn't get those rights. So in the event that happened, Russell created a monster that were essentially glowing silver balls that he called the Toclophane.
Oh.
Which obviously end up coming in the end of series 3. So Russell, I read the writer's tale, and you can see his original sketches for the Toclophane that he did for this episode.
Yeah.
And obviously because the rights went through with the Dalek and everything went great and went ahead. But he obviously reused the idea of the Toclophane in the series 3 finale. So that's just kind of an interesting tidbit.
Have you seen much of that alternative script?
I don't think the script has been released.
Only just because I wonder if the rights of the Daleks hadn't been allowed, would the Toclophane would they have been the
Time War.
The Time
Yes.
War?
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have a Time War without the Daleks, could you?
Well, that's the thing. It's so ingrained in us now that we
Yeah.
don't know any different. But like I say, the Daleks have always been a bit of a pain because how the rights aren't held by the BBC. So yeah, it was that thing of they didn't know if they couldn't get the rights.
They'd have
Daleks just might not have been a part of Doctor Who in the revival.
Wow, God, they played such a huge part.
Well, that's the funny
almost
thing. I
impossible
believe
to
that the
imagine
agreement
that.
in the end was essentially, yeah, okay, well, you can use them, but you have to use them.
Yeah, fair enough. And oh God, they have.
Oh boy, they have, yes.
But yeah, I'm guessing that wraps up today's.
Yeah, that's essentially it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add? Anything else that comes to mind?
Not particularly, only just the fact that we're going to have a little change next week.
Yes, yeah, good point. So we are currently recording this in mid-December. This will be going live in a couple of days, this coming Friday. So the episode after this, in release order at least, this won't matter at all if you're just binging these episodes randomly.
It'll be on the 27th of December.
Yes, so the next episode to go live probably will not be
Long game?
The Long Game.
No.
It will be Joy to the World. the 2024 Christmas special. We talked about this because we weren't sure. Should we just skip it? Obviously, we'll watch it, but like, should we not cover it on the pod and we'll just go through it and then we'll eventually get to it when we get there? But obviously, that's likely to be years down the line.
Yeah.
Or should we just cover it whilst we're there and we'll just jump back?
Yeah. Well, what I suggested was, obviously, again, it will be years till we, again, redo it on the pod. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to have our initial opinions of it and how we feel about it. And then maybe when we eventually cover it again, when we get to that point.
Yeah.
To see how or if our opinions have changed about it.
Yeah.
Again, we'll have a lot more information about, well, I can imagine, oh God, this sounds terrible, but I can imagine at that point Shooty will no longer be the doctor and we would be on a new doctor. So
that's wild.
I know. So after his storyline has finished, whether we'll have a different opinion on it and whether things will be able to tie back to it.
Yeah.
So a little Christmas.
Little Christmas special next. Written by the Moth.
Yeah.
By Stevie Moffat.
But
that's essentially it for Dalek.
Yeah.
Don't forget to drop a like down below if you enjoyed this. Oh, one thing I will say quick is the pod is now also on Spotify. So if anybody listening chooses to listen to their podcasts in an actual podcast format and they don't actually want to stream a still YouTube video for like 2 hours, then follow us over on Spotify and you can listen to it there and save yourself some of your mobile data.
Yeah.
But otherwise don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this. You can comment down below if you have any questions or if you have any just statements or nice things to say to Charlotte.
No.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Oh, why? You like the nice comments.
I do. They genuinely make my day. Connor sends them to me in work now and again. And I'm like,
Yeah. So leave a comment if you have something to share.
Yeah. Also, have yourself a merry little Christmas or a happy holiday or whatever you celebrate. Some nice time off work if you have it.
Yeah.
Because obviously in a couple of days when this goes up, it will be the festive season. So enjoy and relax and spend time with the loved ones.
But with that in mind, I guess we'll see you next time where we won't be going to the fourth great and bountiful human empire, but we'll be
going to a hotel.
Yeah.
Also watch the episode.
Yeah.
Watch
the episode at Christmas.
Yeah, watch the episode and then
we can all be on the same page. Yeah.
Discuss it with us in the chat after.
But until then, stay safe.
Take care.
Stay away from war-hungry pepper pots and great space dustbins.
Yeah, do as you're told and don't touch anything you shouldn't.
I will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.